Man, is this airline a trip? They just changed the flight time to 35 minutes earlier. Didn't say a word, but it's on all the departure boards. So here we go.
That's Matthew Bloom, a frequent traveler. And this is his story of his travels and his jam-packed multi-city international mileage run to help him achieve high-tier airline status. Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the mileage run. And my guest today has completed a pretty crazy mileage run. He took a pretty circuitous route in order to get additional miles so that he could get to the next level of status that he wanted on the airline that he's most loyal to. So what's a mileage run? Well, it involves taking additional flights, generally at the end of the year, to qualify for status with an airline. Now, my guest did just that in 2019. I'd like to introduce you to Matthew Bloom, who took a mileage run in November of 2019 in order to get to the next level of status, which in his case is Diamond Medallion on Delta Airlines. Matthew, welcome to my channel. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'm really fascinated by the fact that you took a really out of the way journey to get to your next level of status. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but just to get started, where are you based out of?
I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, and that's all by choice. I could really be based out of anywhere on the West Coast for my career, but really just found love in the Seattle and Portland area, and been here for about 2 years now.
Oh, that's great. Portland, Oregon, quite an interesting city. I was there about 2 years ago. Really loved it. Loved the vibe there. Loved the culture there. So it's a really nice place to live. And of course, you're at that airport with that really interesting carpet, the Portland Airport carpet, the PDX carpet. What's with the carpet there? I went there, thought to myself, it's a carpet. What are your thoughts on that particular carpet at the airport?
Well, we got the green carpet here at Portland International. And, when I think of the green carpet, I think of the outdoors. We have a beautiful view of Mount Hood from downtown Portland here, and a lot of great hiking trails and waterfalls and nature all around us. So when you step into Portland International, you're stepping into a world of very outdoorsy people. And as they say it here, keep Portland weird. So
yeah,
that's how I like to look at it.
Well, I wish I'd have spoken to you prior to my trip at Portland because I didn't get it at first. And yes, Portland is a little bit weird. I do have a couple of pictures I took out there in front of the Keep Portland Weird signs that I noticed out there. So you're originally from where?
I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up there my entire life, went to college at Michigan State University. And that's also home to one of Delta's largest hubs, Detroit Metro, where they actually have their own terminal, which is pretty cool.
That leads to my next question, of course, since you're from Detroit. So you're fortunate in that you had this large hub for Delta, so you can pretty much go everywhere. It's their Asia hub, it's their northern hub. And then once you moved out to Portland, it looks like you decided to keep your loyalty with Delta, correct?
I did, and that really comes from childhood. My dad flew Northwest Airlines ever since he started his career in sales. And what's pretty cool is he's fluent in Japanese and French. So some of the automotive companies he was working for would send him out to Tokyo and Paris all the time. And he would do that in world business class with Northwest Airlines. So with the World Perks program, he was Platinum Elite, which was their highest at the time, sort of like a Delta Diamond Medallion, or heck, he would even be a 360 member at the rate he was flying. Wow. And of course, back in the day, we got to reap a lot of the benefits of that, where Northwest Airlines was upgrading our entire family to first and not just a companion.
Oh, that must have been pretty amazing as a young person to be able to do that.
6 years old, going to Disney World, seat 1A all the time. I always thought that was my seat because I didn't know any better.
Very nice. So with Delta, you've been flying them for obviously quite a long time. Are most of your trips personal, or are they business, or are they a combination of both?
Prior to the pandemic, it was mostly business. A lot of West Coast travel, and I went to a lot of conferences across the U.S. I went to Hawaii 4 times for business, usually out of Seattle or Los Angeles. Otherwise, when it comes to personal travel, try to take all my vacation days. I suggest anyone with a career in corporate America to do that. And typically going to see my family or going overseas, either to Europe, some of my favorite places to go, Amsterdam and Paris, or over to Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore, over out east.
Wow, that's great. Now, you do mention that you chose to live in Portland by choice, so you can live anywhere you want. It sounds like you've been working remotely, working from home. Is that correct?
I have been working from home. I've been remote for about 2 years now. I started in the office, and then once I moved into more of a field sales role, I've been working from my laptop ever since. And it's pretty cool about being a sales rep and working in a remote role is you can be anywhere at any time. And I think that's what a lot of people have experienced during this pandemic.
Definitely. Now, unfortunately, during the pandemic, obviously, it's caused a lot of havoc throughout the world. I have this opportunity now myself to even just work from wherever I want, but I've kind of just remained at home because of the risks of travel at this point. But you know, as soon as that vaccine comes out, I'm on an airplane again. Absolutely. So you are living in Portland, flying Delta. Does that mean you often have to go to a different airport to get more options, like Seattle?
Yeah, so with Portland and Seattle, it's predominantly Alaska Airlines. So I mostly fly through Seattle to get where I need to go, whether that be on the West Coast, the East Coast, or even out to Hawaii. Delta has direct flights from Portland to Detroit, Minneapolis, Atlanta, all the hub cities. And they used to have a London, Amsterdam, and Tokyo flight as well. But due to the pandemic, they had eliminated those.
Yeah. So once the pandemic hit the United States, what happened to your travel schedule? How often did you fly?
It actually all stopped on, I believe it was March 12th. We all received a corporate communication saying, wherever you are, you should go home now. And we've all thought, in the email it said, hey, this is like a 2-week sort of pause. That turned into 5, 6, 7, 8 months now.
Absolutely.
And things have changed drastically. Ever since that day, we have not been approved to travel by air since.
For work purposes. But personally, how many flights, or have you taken any flights at all in the last 8 months or so?
I have, after getting a negative COVID test, I would go see my family out in Detroit. They took away that Portland to Detroit flight for a little while during the peak of the pandemic. It did come back in July. So that was the longest time I've gone without seeing my family, because usually I was able to see them throughout the year pretty easily.
Right.
Besides that, I've been flying out to Dallas to see my dad. And I went to a wedding in Atlanta that was very, very small, and got the chance to fly the 764 there, which was pretty cool with the new Delta One suites.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, they're flying a lot of those wide bodies now on domestic routes. I guess they need to keep those pilots up to speed since they're not flying as often to Europe and Asia. So that's
yeah, and I think it's a seniority thing too. When it comes to pilots, everything's about seniority. So, the most senior pilots are flying those international wide bodies, so they're keeping them in the air.
Right. And how did you feel flying Delta during the pandemic?
Very safe. So I've actually flown American a bit as well, and they're cramming people onto the planes, which I don't think is the right thing. But we all have our opinions. I still did it because, the schedule allowed for it. So Delta's doing it the right way. This is the way to do it during a pandemic, and I think it's going to only increase consumer confidence when flying Delta when a vaccine is available.
Absolutely. And I definitely share the same sentiments as you, and flew Delta exclusively during the pandemic and felt very, very comfortable with all the safety measures that they put in place, whether it's sanitizing aircraft between flights, social distancing during boarding rear to forward, and limiting food options. It was definitely my choice to go to. So we'll talk a little bit about the pandemic and your thoughts on the future a little bit later on. I want to get to what this interview is all about. The fact that you took an absolutely crazy mileage run at the end of 2019. Now, I'm going to share my mileage run story with you first. I only did an intentional mileage run several years ago. It was actually just to get to the next level of status, just like you. And all I did was I live in New York City. I flew from JFK to LAX, and then I flew back to New York City the same day. And I thought that was crazy. And it's not crazy because you've got an absolutely circuitous route that you took. And do tell us, about the process in terms of booking. And you're doing this, of course, to stay within the SkyTeam network. So, you're booking, talk about the different airlines that you flew in order to get the miles and how those actually apply to Delta Airlines so you can maintain diamond status for the next year. So first of all, what was the circumstance that made you realize that you need to take a lot of flights to get to this next level?
So in November 1st, 2019, I was starting to, of course, audit my Delta Skymiles account.
As we all do.
Yeah. And I was at approximately 198,000 MQMs and 10,000 MQDs, which just was not enough.
You're buying inexpensive flights.
Yeah, so I book in advance. I try to get the best price on flights when I can. Mm-hmm. And doing a lot of domestic travel doesn't call for a ton of MQDs, especially if it's on the West Coast with the competition from Alaska.
Right.
So when I saw I was short on MQDs, I had to start looking for some options. And I really want to give a shout out to premium fare deals on Flyer Talk. That's a great forum. Everybody should join. People are scoping out great deals on business class flights there. That's why it's called premium fare deals. And that really allowed me to, get some ideas turning in my head on what I needed to do to get approximately $5,000 in medallion qualification dollars.
So you just didn't go to the Delta website or a SkyTeam website. You went to an external website and then applied that information back to Delta.
Exactly, yeah. And my real goal here was to have no out-of-pocket expenses. This could have been very, very expensive. The way I did it could have been very, very expensive, but I leveraged a couple of the credit cards I used. I'm very, very big into the points and miles, have 17 credit cards in my wallet. And leveraging those allowed me to do this basically for free.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So you're doing it for free, but you're still able to get the mileage, the dollar amount added to your Skymiles account.
Yeah, that's the power of some of these travel portals with the credit card companies, whether it be Chase, American Express, Citi, or Capital One. For this particular mileage run, I chose to use Chase and my Chase Sapphire Reserve, since you can redeem for travel at 1.5 cents per point, which is the highest value out there.
Wow. You learn something new every day. I was not aware of that, actually. My mileage run was basically just look at the airline's website, figure out what kind of fare you need to spend the money on, and then just go for it. But that's obviously a very good way to save some money during the trip. So you found out what you needed to do, and did you kind of have an idea of the itinerary that you wanted to take, or did that website tell you the itinerary?
My goal, to be honest, was to go to Europe. It was an off-peak time, but it's just something I'm comfortable with. I was more comfortable with going to Europe than going to Tokyo. In the end, I actually had two options to get this done. I could have gone to Tokyo, or I could have gone to Amsterdam or to Paris. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I chose Paris was because I was going to be able to catch a Boeing 787-9 on Aero Mexico versus a Boeing 787-8 to Tokyo and back.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So you got on the larger one.
Yes, and the product is completely different when it comes to the 787-9 and the 787-8 on Aero Mexico. Mm-hmm. You're looking at 121 on the 787-9 with an onboard lounge, mm-hmm. which is pretty cool. And there's really just a sense of pride that the crew had with the 787-9 versus the 787-8.
Really?
So when it came to the 787-8, it was a 222 configuration. Mm-hmm. I had a neighbor next to me, and you just didn't feel that same sense of pride from the 787-9. Right. Even came down to the hard product there with, the seat and the footwells. You're going to sleep a lot better in a reverse herringbone configuration in your own little corner.
There's nothing beats a single seat. I'll take a single seat on a CRJ 900 as opposed to the double seat on a 737 sometimes, just to have that privacy. Of course, when you're traveling alone, which it sounds like you were traveling alone, correct?
I was, yeah, I did this all alone. I don't think anyone would want to join me for this. It was kind of crazy.
So,
And I had a particular goal in mind that I was looking to achieve.
so what route did you take? It sounds like you did something pretty crazy. So tell us through the different steps that you actually, the different cities that you went to, and the airlines that you flew on.
Yeah, so it all started here in Portland, Oregon,
Right.
and I hopped on a Delta flight up to Vancouver, BC. So that required Portland to Seattle to Vancouver.
Ah.
Once I got there, I stayed a night at the Hilton Vancouver Airport. I believe it was 50,000 Hilton points for the night. And the next morning, the mileage run began. So pretty easy miles at Portland, Seattle to Vancouver.
So that was still contributing towards your miles, of course, going to Vancouver.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah. But the big mileage run was coming that next morning.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So next morning, just around 8 a.m., it all started. Started in Vancouver, BC, and I flew down to Mexico City. That was approximately a 5.5-hour flight. And as everybody may know who flies Delta through Mexico City for a connection, your layovers are going to be very, very long. So had a very long layover in Mexico City. And when it comes to that layover, make sure you either have a Delta Reserve card or an American Express Platinum card. Those cards will get you into the Amex Centurion Lounge, which is very different from the ones you see here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
The Amex Centurion Lounge in Mexico City has no buffet, so everything is served to you at a table, which is very nice in a crowded airport like Mexico City on a normal day.
Wow.
We had table sit-down service with all sorts of different menu options. The food was fantastic. The bar was an open bar, so you were able to get whatever drink selection you like. I was able to take a shower before the flight, able to brush my teeth, and basically just get ready for bed there. And anyone who's flown Aeromexico knows a delay. You have not flown Aeromexico before?
No.
Mexico City is the worst place to get delayed, and they do not tell you why you're delayed or when you are delayed. So you'll go to the gate when it's your boarding time, and nobody's going to say a word. You won't see a plane there, and nobody's going to say anything. So we ended up leaving about 3 hours past our scheduled departure time at 2:35 a.m.
Wow.
So that first leg was we went Vancouver to Mexico City, and then I chose to go to Paris this time. It's somewhere I've been many, many times. I actually know a couple people there, so I could have some dinner with some friends.
Nice.
And on the outbound, we flew on the 787-9. So that was going to be the most comfortable configuration for sleeping, which is why I chose that on the outbound to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we talked about earlier, my goal here was to gain MQDs, so medallion qualification dollars, which is why I flew Aeromexico. If we go on Delta's website and look up Aeromexico earnings in business for your medallion qualification dollars on Delta, you will see that you'll earn 40% of the total distance flown in medallion qualification dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So the total distance from Vancouver to Mexico City to Paris was approximately, if I take a look at my notes here, we're looking at approximately 8,000 miles each way.
Wow.
So basically what we want to do is take 16,000, multiply it by 0.4, since that's what I'll get in medallion qualification dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was I was going to get about $6,500 towards my medallion qualification dollar count.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. Mm-hmm.
And that's more than I needed in the end, but
which can roll over to next year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
the miles roll over, but the dollars don't roll over, correct?
The dollars do not roll over, but the miles do.
Yes.
And it was a pretty big earning in miles as well. MQMs ended up totaling about 27,000.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Yes. So totally worth it in the end for my little 3 to 4 day trip. And, once I got to Paris, I ended up getting there at like 8 p.m. after sleeping for 8 hours on the plane. Ended up using my World of Hyatt points to stay at the Park Hyatt in Paris. Everyone's seen those on all the travel blogs. It's one of those aspirational places to go. And, it lives up to the hype. It's a great place to stay. And stayed in the city for about a day and a half. It rained every single day. It's the off season. And after that day and a half and some great food, seeing some great people, and having a very expensive breakfast at the Park Hyatt that was waived due to globalist status, hopped back on a plane to Mexico City to repeat what I just did 2 days later.
So you weren't going directly home from Paris. You were going back down to Mexico City.
Yes, I was going back to Mexico City to overnight there at their Hilton. So the Hilton Mexico City Airport for about 30,000 Hilton points. And then the next morning back up to Vancouver and then back down to Portland.
So that time in Mexico City, you didn't get any opportunity to really do anything. You were pretty much just sleeping, correct?
Yeah, and I had ambitious goals. They have some beautiful hotels in downtown Mexico City, as well as some great restaurants. But after a trip like that, I can tell you, I was beat.
Of course,
it was very, very tiring, but totally worth it. One thing that sort of threw me off that next morning, it's about 6 a.m. and I'm going to board my flight, and I take a look at the departure board there. And then I take a look at my paper ticket because, when flying an airline that's not Delta, I don't trust my cell phone. I'm carrying a paper ticket. And the departure times differed from the departure board and my ticket. And when that happened, the departure time on the board was a lot earlier than it was on my ticket, which was seriously concerning.
Man, is this airline a trip? They just changed the flight time to 35 minutes earlier. Didn't say a word, but it's on all the departure boards. So here we go.
So that's when I really start to haul it to the gate to make sure nothing had changed there. And nothing did, but even by the time my flight departed, departure board still didn't change. And
Really?
That's just another oddity with Mexico City.
that is very, very strange. I had one flight this year depart 20 minutes early, which I never heard of. 20 minutes early, that's a lot. It was a Delta flight, a Delta connection flight out of Minneapolis. And I was notified, however, on the app. Of course, I still do print a boarding pass just to have it, just in case something goes wrong with my phone. But on the app, as well as my boarding pass, it did, very, very explicitly let me know your flight is departing 20 minutes early. So it's quite interesting that they wouldn't even let you know otherwise by looking up at the boards there.
Yeah, and another issue I ran into is this itinerary wasn't bookable through Delta.com. And the second part was I didn't want to pay for it either. Right. So that's why I used the ticket itself was about $2,200 or approximately, I believe it was 154,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points. Mm-hmm. And that booked it direct with Aeromexico, although I had my Skymiles information inputted into Aeromexico's website. So, it was just, it was a thing where Aeromexico wasn't notifying me and it wasn't on Delta.
Right. There's no cross communication appropriate for that particular situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Aeromexico, you then took back up to Vancouver.
Yeah, so I took Aeromexico back up to Vancouver and then did the same thing on Delta. I had about 2.5 hours. Went Vancouver to Seattle to Portland to then fly out the next day for work.
Oh, really? Where'd you go after that? Was it a long trip or was it a short trip after?
It was a short trip. I just had to go to Boise, Idaho, which, the next morning. So I got home at like 7 p.m. And next morning at 8 a.m. I was already back in Seattle to connect over to Boise, Idaho.
So, you still got some more MQMs and MQDs with that trip also, because you were still in November, correct?
Yeah, and the cool thing about living in Portland and flying with Delta is, with each leg, they have a minimum of 500 MQMs you can earn. So although Portland to Seattle only clocks in at 132 miles, you earn 500 MQMs for each leg there.
So a round trip is 1,000 miles right there. And you're
exactly.
you're not even going 500 round trip, and you'll still get 1,000. So yeah, it's great that they actually do that. It really helps with status. for years, I was a silver medallion on Delta, and I was flying a very, very short route. But I was fortunate enough that they had that 500 mile kind of giveaway for the MQMs for something under 500 miles. So I was able to get to the silver level of status on Delta. And those were basically flights every 2 weeks or so. Which allowed me to get that level. And I was ecstatic at that time when I was silver medallion. Then I worked my way up all the way to diamond by taking longer routes. And it's amazing what you do need to do to actually get to that particular point. Like I said, I did take that trip over to LA 1 year. I generally fly domestically, but I'll always add on a trip to Europe or Hawaii just to get those miles. But I don't like to call it a mileage run because I generally stay a lot of time. I spend a considerable amount of time at that destination, so it's just a vacation. But of course, just trying to stay within the SkyTeam network. Have you done any KLM at all with Delta?
Yeah, so I've flown, it was last year in July, I flew upper deck of the 747.
Oh, nice.
And I did this on purpose. I flew to Chicago because I was able to catch a pretty good fare there. Upper deck of the 747 on KLM, which is an awesome experience. One that we'll never have again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think they just recently got rid of their 747s, KLM, correct?
They did, yeah. So they're moving to a more fuel efficient fleet, as they should, economics wise. And but the 747 is just such an iconic plane. It's one that everyone wants to fly on. And but the economics of it these days, and something like an Airbus A380 as well, just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this grandeur of these large airplanes also, just as a traveler, just makes you want to try it. And I've flown on the A380, even on a non-SkyTeam member, just to fly in the A380 a couple of times.
Yeah.
So it was just an absolutely fantastic. I still have not been on the 787 though. Unfortunately, in my trips across the pond, it's generally on an older A330 or a 767, but that's just kind of the routing that I normally get. Schedule, of course, has been very important to me, working generally in office. But, now that we're in different times, as we mentioned earlier, I think that it's going to be easier to take more trips once everything clears up because you don't necessarily need to be in a physical place, which is absolutely great. I'm loving it.
Yeah, and I think leisure travel is only going to go up with this whole pandemic. A lot of companies, including my own, is thinking of moving to a remote environment if you so choose to do so. They're not going to make you come back to the office. And that seems to be the general take with a lot of corporations out there right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that situation. Because of necessity, I moved to home for, avoiding coronavirus, and it looks like it's going to be like that forever. So it's really going to give me that opportunity to travel more often to different places, just work wherever I am. It was always a struggle on a Friday night, taking the last flight out to try to be back on Sunday night. When I take the last flight out, quite often I'll need to take a connecting flight, and then I'll miss my connection. And because it was the last flight out, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere overnight. So I think that's actually, one good thing that is going to come out of the pandemic, that, leisure travel definitely will pick up. Business travel, what are your thoughts on that yourself? For someone who does travel for business, do you really think that it's going to go back to the levels of pre-pandemic for yourself and in general?
For myself, I don't think I'll be doing the 5 to 7 day trips anymore. I can see the 2 to 3 day still happening on a weekly basis. Yeah. I don't think anything replaces a face-to-face interaction. This is still a face-to-face interaction, but it's virtual. But actually showing up and being there says a lot of words without saying any words.
Right.
And
virtual handshake.
Yes, exactly. When it comes to, conferences, I depend on a lot of conferences throughout the year to meet new customers and, try to build new partnerships. Yeah. And nothing can replace that. I've done a couple virtual conferences this year, including our industry-wide conference, and it wasn't the same.
Really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It just was not the same. Nothing can replace that face-to-face interaction. And even during the pandemic, I've been doing a very little business travel, just driving to neighboring cities to meet with customers. And I can tell you that's where the most impactful business deals happen, are face-to-face.
Face-to-face, yeah. And I'm assuming your territory is national, so you can pretty much be anywhere in the country normally?
It's most of the West Coast. A lot of the conferences we do are national.
Okay, right. Yeah, I probably should have attended about 5 conferences this year. I do work in the aviation industry and went to 0. So nothing absolutely would replace that. And I don't think that they did have any virtual conferences. Maybe one or two did, but we didn't attend that. But it's always great to be on that airplane to, first of all, just to get out there and fly and have a different experience, go to a different city, and of course the networking that needs to be done in person. But I'm all for the remote, when you're doing an office day, I'm all for remote at home. So.
Yeah, me too. And it seems like that's the way it's going to go. And I think it's for the better. I think it's long overdue.
Absolutely. And you get to be where you need to be. You don't need to be, in Detroit. You don't need to be in Portland, but you choose to be in a particular city and you're there. So it's fantastic. You can actually do that. Great. So flying Delta or any other aircraft, what's your favorite airplane to fly on?
Oh, that's a tough one. I can tell you, I sleep best on the 787s. I think it's because of, the advanced filtration systems in there, and they actually keep the feel of the cabin at an altitude that's lower than most other aircraft.
I could hear that.
Dead silent in there. The dimming windows are awesome. And, I really value, usually when I'm flying a 787, value sleep. And that's where I can sleep best. So coming in a close second is, of course, that A380. It is just a jumbo of an aircraft.
What airline did you fly?
I flew Lufthansa first class on the A380, and it was, I would say, the best experience of my life. It was wild.
Great. And were you able to maximize your cards or anything to try to get into the first class cabin?
Yeah, I hate to talk about, Star Alliance here. I used Aeroplan miles to fly Frankfurt to Los Angeles direct. It was 70,000 Aeroplan miles and a bit of taxes. And, that got you access to the first class lounge in Frankfurt. They drive you up to the plane, in a Mercedes. You get to take a little picture in front of the plane, and then just the onboard service is spectacular. And I'm pretty sure those redemptions are still available at aeroplan.com.
Interesting. Got to check that out. When I took my A380s, I did them on the two Middle Eastern carriers on Etihad and Emirates, and I was not aware of all that, so I just purchased a coach ticket. So sat on that 15-hour flight to the Middle East, basically in a coach seat. But it was a great experience. I just loved flying on the airplane. I actually felt like I was on a cruise ship in a coach seat. So it had that grand feeling about it. So definitely something to consider for trying to upgrade myself to a different class next time.
Yeah, I mostly fly myself when it comes to domestic flights. I'm always in the back, and I'm totally cool with that. No big preference on seat for me. Keep me in an aisle, and I'm good.
Yeah, I always book myself in a coach cabin and just kind of wait for the upgrade to clear, which happens primarily when I'm flying. I often fly hub to hub, Delta hub to Delta hub, so I rarely get those upgrades. But once I go onto the spoke airport, I generally will get an upgrade. And I'm happier on a CRJ 900 first class than I am anyway on a 737 first class because it's a single seat. So it's
and the leg room is tremendous on those things too. It's totally worth it.
Definitely. All right. So I would like to ask you a couple of questions before we finish about your thoughts for the future when it comes to status. And we'll talk again about Delta Airlines, since you're a diamond on Delta. What do you think the airline will do, and what is your personal thought on what you think the airline should do from your point of view?
So the airline has already done a lot. Delta has extended all of our MQMs to be valid through 2021 as well. So I'm walking in with already 125,000, which, meets the qualification. Tough part for me, as it was even in non-pandemic times, was reaching those medallion qualification dollars. Oh, yeah. And what I believe Delta is going to do in that respect is they're going to lower the threshold as American and United already have. I could see that $15,000 threshold going down to a 12.
You think so?
Yeah. In order to accommodate diamonds like us who are traveling less due to the pandemic. Vaccine is on the way, and it seems like it's coming very, very quickly. I don't think companies are going to say, we got a vaccine now, go back out and do what you were doing. I believe the start of the year is still going to be very, very slow. We're not going to be traveling as much, and I could see Q2, Q3, Q4 picking up. But until then, that leaves a gap for our medallion qualification dollars there.
Yeah, American and United did announce that they would lower the thresholds. It's interesting because Delta was the first airline to actually come up with this program of extending status, and all the other airlines kind of follow Delta on that. And the other majors are the ones that are actually announcing what's going on. Delta has not yet, at the time of this recording, announced exactly what they're going to be doing. So, hopefully they do something to make us extend our diamond status into the following year after next year. That would be absolutely great. I'd love it if they just rolled everything over altogether, but you never know. And of course, these are very, very difficult times and things are just unpredictable. And the vaccine is very, very promising, but it's a little bit too early to really tell at this point what things are going to be like. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But that's pretty insightful information. So, I'll try to get my travel up if that definitely does become the case to maintain the diamond status. Great.
Yeah. And Peter, I would do that, the medallion qualification dollar run in a second again, but there's a lot of border restrictions right now that have not been lifted. So that option is off the table.
Yeah, it's really not about, the safety of flying on an airplane, because as we all know, flying on airplanes during the pandemic is very, very safe. It's just the rules about going to certain destinations, whereas American citizens, you can't go, or even in the United States, there's a lot of cities that have higher levels of infection that are just, not as safe to go to. Here in New York City, that was the case during the beginning of the outbreak, where, no one wanted to come to New York, no one left New York at all. And unfortunately, the flights in New York are still at an all-time low. We really haven't recovered, but hopefully things will pick up soon, of course, with what's going on with the great news of the vaccine. So, yeah, you can just take a flight, go on an airplane, and come right back to your destination, as I did once also. Yeah. If you're concerned about anything. Great. All right, Matthew. Is there anything else that you'd like to say at all before we wrap this up today?
Peter, I just want to thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to join you today, and hope to see you in a Sky Club soon.
Definitely.
It's on the way, and
with a hot meal. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much, Matthew, for the opportunity. It's really, really interesting. If any of my viewers out there have any other interesting stories on what they did in 2019 to get to their level of status, leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'd love to have you on my channel to discuss this. Or if there's any other topics that you're interested in, just put a comment down below and I'll talk about them. I'm really looking for interesting ideas, and it's a great way to learn new things from different people. I know that I learned a lot today from Matthew that I didn't even know about. So there's a lot out there that you can learn from individuals. Everybody, don't forget to please subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that bell button so that you're alerted as every time I post a new video for you. Stay tuned for more videos in the future, and I thank you all very much for joining. And Matthew, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you.
Thank you.